Hey guys, stay patient here. Yes, the beard's gone for now, don't worry, it'll be back. I like to freshen up every now and again. But welcome today to the second episode of How to Be a Trophy Hunter. Now, it's been a while since the first one, and that's mostly because I've been sort of setting things up so that I can give my Patreon subscribers the opportunity to be involved in this particular episode. You see, we're going to be taking a bit of a detour today, and rather than discussing how to trophy hunt, we're going to be covering a question that crops up on the channel occasionally, and that is, why do we trophy hunt? Why do people care about trophies in the first place? Now, there seems to be a fairly widespread misconception among non-trophy hunters. They tend to assume that for us it's all about sort of climbing leaderboards and gaining the admiration and respect of other gamers. But in my experience, and I've played with and talked to a lot of trophy hunters in my time, for the majority of them, that's nothing to do with it. For the most part, trophy hunting to each gamer is a very personal thing to them. And because we all have our own reasons for being interested in trophies in the first place, I wanted to make sure to share some of your comments as well as my own. And we're going to be looking into several ways in which trophy hunting can really make gaming more enjoyable. So we're going to dive straight into some of your comments, guys, and then we're going to kind of discuss them in more detail afterwards. First up, we have Chris A-Lot. Now he says, the reason why I am a trophy hunter. I've been a trophy hunter from day one. I was Xbox back in the day. I just love earning trophies, gives you more enjoyment in games, and makes games last longer. And for my health reasons, that takes my mind off that, focusing on earning plats. And I wouldn't have played most of the games if it wasn't for the trophies. It gives you more of a wider choice. So there's a couple key things he mentions here. Firstly is the fact that games can be more enjoyable if you focus on the trophies. And he also talks about how there are lots of games that he played because of the trophies, and it's given him a wider experience of gaming in general. So we're going to cover those 2 points in more detail a bit later. But there's an interesting point he brings up, and that is his health issues. Now, this is something that doesn't affect everyone, of course, but there are a lot of gamers who maybe have health issues or depression or whatever the case may be. And it's something that I can personally relate to. As many of you know, I have health problems myself, and I can very much agree with what Chris says here, that trophy hunting really helps to take your mind off the problems that you're facing. Now, for most people, if you've got a full-time job, gaming is all about getting home in the evening and just being able to wind down and relax after a long, hard day. But for some of us, if we're spending more time gaming because we're not able to hold down a sort of conventional job, it really does help to sort of focus our minds and take it off the health problems we may be suffering with and give us something to aim for. So that's quite an interesting point that he mentions there. Now, let's move on to John Tancredi's comment. He says, the reason I trophy hunt is because even before trophies, I was already a completionist. I had all the checklists and the game FAQ pages up. I also don't just play for the platinum. I get a huge e-boner when I 100% my games, aka DLC or games without platinums as well. So here, John is referring to a mindset that a lot of trophy hunters have, and that is one of going for 100% completion on all of their games. And this is quite cool because it brings all of our trophy hunting together and it gives us an overarching goal that we can aim for. And it really heightens that sense of accomplishment because all the games we play are all contributing towards the same goal. Now we're going to have a look at John Rogers' comment now, which is a little bit longer, and he does mention a couple of the things that we've referred to already, and we're going to go into a bit more detail on some of these key points. So he says that when trophies were first introduced in 2008, I didn't pay them any mind as I had already been playing several PS3 games that didn't support them, and I think a lot of us will relate to that. I was gaming on PS3 before trophies existed, and when they first come along, you're aware of them, you see them popping up, but you don't really know what they are, what their relevance is. He goes on to say, though, that I played off and on from 2008 to 2015 with AAA titles that I enjoyed, primarily NCAA football online dynasties with friends and Call of Duty multiplayer mode. That type of play was never trophy friendly. Then over Christmas break in 2015, I got my first platinum after completing Game of Thrones. So I'm guessing that he's referring to the Telltale Games version. And of course, that just requires you to finish the game. You earn all the trophies and the platinum just for getting through the game. So for a lot of people, it will be titles like the Telltale Games, or maybe some other games that easily give you the trophies if you just focus on sort of 100%ing it, doing all the activities within the game. There are a lot of titles like that don't really require you to go too far out of your way to earn the platinum. And for a lot of people, their first plat will be a game like that, and some of those people will find that they're kind of bitten by the trophy bug, as it were, as John goes on to explain that he was. He says, "I can't explain why, but it was a nice feeling to finally add one of those." So he was aware of what trophies were, but he never earned a platinum. "I decided I wanted to get a few more, so I aimed for them in some of the games I already had and was intending to play, like Wolfenstein." And he goes on to explain how his gaming was enhanced, how his experiences with games was improved, and he found it more enjoyable as a result of going for those trophies. He says, "Focusing on the trophy aspect over the next few games opened me up to playing the games in ways I wouldn't have otherwise, and encouraged me to play game modes I would have ignored. I found that I really enjoyed experiencing more from the games I played. A trophy hunter perspective also opened my eyes to new types of games, instead of just the sports and FPS AAA titles I primarily focused on in the past. Thus, a new hobby was born. I scored 40 plats in 2016 and have secured 12 so far in 2017. I've also enjoyed several non-platinum indie games like Inside." So John here brings out the same two key points that Chris Alott referred to. We're going to focus on this idea of trophy hunting opening our eyes to a wider variety of different titles. Now, you don't need to be a trophy hunter to be able to break out of your comfort zone, but there are so many games these days, and our brains are kind of hardwired into choosing something that we think we're going to like, even if we're trying to pick something completely new and different. But if you start, occasionally using trophies as a deciding factor on which games you're going to play, then it really does open you up to a much, much wider variety of different titles. It's almost like potluck, You're pretty much randomly selecting games from all different sort of genres, AAA games, indie games, long games, short games, and it does result in you trying all sorts of different games that you would never have otherwise tried. And when you do this, you find yourself stumbling across some really cool experiences that you would never have even heard of otherwise. Now for me, Icy is a really great example of this. It's a game that I would literally have never even heard of if it wasn't for the fact that I'm a trophy hunter and I do sort of research games trying to find easy platinums. It's very much a hidden gem. It's so hidden, in fact, that you can only buy it from the Hong Kong store. So I definitely wouldn't have stumbled across it naturally. But because I'm a trophy hunter, I bought it, I played it, and I loved it. And I'm really glad I did get around to playing it because it's so clever, the writing is very funny, it's a lot of fun to play, but it's very unique as well. And I think it's one of my personal sort of biggest surprises this generation. And that's the thing, when you do play games just for the trophies, you end up being surprised by a lot of them because you go in with very low expectations. So if the game's actually quite good, it feels even better because our expectations were low going in. Now another good example is Transistor. This is a game that I was very much aware of during the development process, but it never really grabbed me. It looked interesting, but it wasn't one that I was desperate to play on day one. But because I am a trophy hunter, and I knew that the trophies were fairly reasonable, and the game reviewed quite well, I figured to myself, you know what, it's not very long, it's not going to pull me away from the games I'm really enjoying at the moment for a long period of time. So if I don't enjoy it, I still get the trophies out of it. They are kind of a consolation prize. But it's worth trying these games out because Transistor ended up being one of my favourite PS4 games to date. I still think it's one of the best games on the console. And again, if I hadn't been a trophy hunter, I probably wouldn't have bothered with it. Now, of course, I don't recommend that you only play games that are easy platinums. We all want to make sure that our main diet, as it were, when it comes to gaming, is games that we're going to enjoy, games that we're familiar with, or that we already know we like the genre or the franchise or whatever the case may be. But these sort of shorter, easier platinums can almost act as palate cleansers. When we finish one game, do a couple of quick plats, sort of clear our palate and be able to start over fresh again with another big AAA game that we're really excited to play. Now, of course, although this will introduce you to some exciting new games that you may not have otherwise tried, there will also be a lot of terrible games that you end up playing as a result. But I find that there are some benefits to playing bad games, believe it or not. Sometimes, even if the game doesn't grab you, if it's one that you're not particularly enjoying, it can open your mind to some new ideas. Maybe it's a genre that you think to yourself, you know what, this game's terrible, but if it was made well, or if there was another similar game that was well made and was enjoyable, then I'd actually really like to try that. Maybe it's a genre that you've never played before, and it can sometimes send you down a new route, as it were, to a new destination, a new style of game that you'd never tried before, and open your eyes to some sort of new ideas for games that would be worth your time. Another thing that wasn't mentioned in the comments we read is something I personally find, and that's the fact that sometimes playing a terrible game can make the next good game you play seem even better. It's a bit like food. You know, if you really love chocolate, but that's all you ate for every single meal, then it will become very mundane. But if you sit through a meal that you're not really enjoying, maybe it's healthy food, a lot of vegetables and stuff that you don't like, especially when you're a kid, once you've sat through that, and then you get to enjoy your dessert, your chocolate-based dessert, it tastes so good because in comparison to what you've been eating, it's really tasty. And that's kind of like games in a way. For me personally, if all I played was amazing games, then none of them would really stand out. And it would start to become almost a little bit kind of mundane. But if we sit through a terrible game first, and then we get to play something we really enjoy, it kind of enhances that experience that much more so. But sometimes you just have to accept that it's maybe a worthwhile sacrifice playing some terrible games so that you can kind of widen your gaming knowledge, your experience, and find some hidden gems amongst them. And of course, like we mentioned before, the trophies themselves are a kind of consolation prize. If the game ends up being terrible, then at least you get a platinum out of it. It doesn't really take much time out of your gaming schedule if you're playing like a 1 or 2 hour platinum. But it is good. It does kind of widen our experience. It makes us more of a kind of rounded out gamer, and it can hopefully in some way lead us down a path that will result in us finding a new genre or a new franchise that we really love. Now, the other key factor that was mentioned by a couple of the comments there was the fact that games that we are planning on playing for fun anyway can become more enjoyable because we're going for the trophies. Now, that's not true of every game. There are some games that are really almost ruined by the trophies. Tomb Raider back from 2013 comes to mind. That was a game that, had fairly straightforward single-player trophies. It was very enjoyable, the campaign, and, grabbing all the collectibles was fun. But as soon as you got to the multiplayer trophies, it's probably only people who have a high completion percentage on their account already that they're trying to retain. It's probably only those types of people that actually stuck with the multiplayer and played it through for the amount of time that you needed to earn all the trophies. It was very much tacked on, it was kind of pointless, they threw it in, it wasn't very popular, you had to pretty much grind out the XP yourself in a solo game, it was extremely monotonous. And the game itself was kind of ruined in many ways by the inclusion of those ridiculously long-winded online trophies. But as the guys mentioned, there are lots of games that are enhanced by the trophies. Maybe there are game modes, like John said, that he would never have usually played, but because there was a trophy related to them, he'd try the game mode and end up maybe enjoying it. Sometimes I'll be talking to someone about a game and I'll ask for their opinion on a certain feature. And they'll say to me, whoa, hang on, I didn't know you could do that. I wasn't aware of that. I'll have to go and try it out. And I'll say to them, there is a trophy related to it. So when you look through a trophy list, quite often it can make you aware of features of the game that aren't necessarily explained to you in the game itself. Maybe they aren't part of the tutorial, maybe you're left to your own devices to figure things out. And I know people who've played through entire games without realizing one of the key features of the game was even available. But trophies can often bring those things to your attention. Sometimes as well, trophies will require you to play through a game more than once. Now, when I first played The Last of Us, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't blown away by it. The actual gameplay side of things just felt like a very kind of generic third-person shooter. So although I enjoyed the story, I wasn't that enamored by the actual gameplay itself. But because of the trophies, I went back and played the game again on Survivor difficulty, and that's when it really clicked, That's when I realised what the game was really all about. When you play it on Survivor, it becomes pretty much an entirely different genre. It goes from being a third-person shooter to being a survival game, because you literally have to be so careful with your resources and with your ammo. You don't have enough ammo to be able to fight your way through the whole game. You have to play very stealthily. You have to really scout around looking for supplies, and you have to be much more tactical, and it makes the whole experience a lot tenser, a lot more exciting. And after my second playthrough of The Last of Us on Survivor difficulty, it went from being a game that I enjoyed to being one of my favourite games of all time. Now, if it wasn't for trophies, I might never have played it a second time, and I might never have tried out the highest setting. So that's another key example of how trophies can make a game more enjoyable. Bioshock Infinite is a similar case as well. Playing that a second time is so cool because there's a lot of dialogue in the game that only makes sense to you when you know how the game ends. So when you come back and start over again, there's all this writing, there's all this interaction between characters and lines of dialogue that you didn't even really notice the first time through. But you think, wow, that's so clever, as you're listening to it, it all falls into place and it makes the whole thing just so much more enjoyable and interesting. There are just so many ways in which trophies can make a game more enjoyable, and they can add to the lifespan of the game as well. You can go back in, you can challenge yourself. Maybe you're someone who likes to face a challenge in games. So once you've completed the story, you can go back in, maybe play it on a higher difficulty, or go out there and do some of the more difficult side content. Of course, you don't need to be a trophy hunter to do all this, but it is a way in which, hunting for the trophies really motivates you to push yourself further in each game you play and get more out of it. There are some other reasons why trophy hunting can be enjoyable or at least helpful. One of the things I find useful is the fact that trophies help you determine how long to stick with a game. So when people say to me, why don't you carry on playing this game or that game? I just say to them, well, I've got all these other games that I really want to get to. And I would find it very difficult to determine, at what point I'd spent long enough with a game, And so trophies kind of give you that goal to aim for. And once you've earned them, you can move on. Obviously, if you don't have other games to play, stick with the game for as long as you like. But this is just something personal to me, that I have all these games in my backlog that I really want to get to. And if I'm enjoying playing something, trophies give me that waypoint, that milestone to kind of, right, I've reached that now, so I'm done with the game and I can move on to something else. And it just makes it a bit of an easier decision, choosing when to stop playing something. And of course, on top of that, it does add a social element to your games. You might not necessarily be a social gamer. And, I know a lot of you don't like online trophies, but sometimes you do need to add friends, add people who play the game to your friends list so that you can earn trophies with them. And this is a great way of expanding your pool of PlayStation friends and becoming a more social gamer if you weren't already. I personally found that being a trophy hunter resulted in me having hundreds of friends on my friends list, and it kind of makes the online-based games that much more enjoyable because you know that you've already got people there that you can call on that are, a similar type of gamer to you. They're also trophy hunters and they have a similar mindset. So guys, they are some of the reasons I think people hunt for trophies, some of the reasons why I do, and we've looked at some of the reasons that you guys have given us as well. A lot of people say to me, why do you use trophies as a way of deciding which games you want to play? Why would you avoid a game just because the trophies are unobtainable or they're too difficult or whatever? And I just say to them, well, there's far too many games anyway. There's more games than any of us could get through, and there's more games that I want to play than I have time for. So trophies are really just a tiebreaker. It's not about denying ourselves certain games because of their difficulty, because there's always going to be some games that we're not going to have time for. So if you've got 10 games in front of you and you'd love to play all of them, but you only have time for 5, and 5 of them have trophy sets that you're going to be able to earn, and 5 of them don't, then why not choose the 5 that you can earn the trophies on? So I think trophies are a great way of widening our experience, becoming a more rounded gamer in general. So there you go, guys. That's sort of some of the reasons I think that people trophy hunt. I hope this has been enjoyable. I hope I haven't rambled on for too long, but we are going to get more into the subject of how to be a trophy hunter in future episodes. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Let us know in the comments below what you think of some of the reasons that we've spoken about, and also let us know why you trophy hunt personally, if you are a trophy hunter, of course. But once again, guys, thank you very much for all the support. I'll catch you very soon in my next video. Cheers.